This is the Reichstag in Berlin. In 1945, it was captured by the Russians. The victory helped confirm the division of Germany, and later of the whole of Europe, into East and West. But this is the story of a battle which might have changed all that. A battle for the bridges over the Rhine, which might just have put the Union Jack on the Reichstag instead of the red flag.
The concept was brilliant, and it could and should have worked. And the war would have been ended in 6 months earlier.
It's the story of Operation Market Garden. With the D-Day landings in June 1944, the Western Allies' assault on Nazi Germany began triumphantly. But fighting their way off the beaches and on through northern France became a bitter struggle.
I don't think it's generally appreciated that the speed at which a battalion bled to death was higher in Normandy than it was on the Somme. Extremely thick hedges, some of them 1,000 years old. An absolute defender's paradise.
The Germans fought hard in Normandy for nearly 3 months, and then at last the dam broke. Near Falaise, the Germans were caught between the Americans and the British, and their armies were shattered. As the survivors fell back towards Germany, the Allies pursued them, advancing more than 250 miles in less than 3 weeks.
It was beyond our wildest dreams. We did 97 miles in something like 12 hours, which was the fastest advance of a division in history.
First Paris, then Brussels were liberated.
The Belgians were absolutely wonderful, and you know, they all jumped on our tanks with bottles of champagne, and we had a wonderful time in Brussels.
The troops were elated. The Germans were weak, and just a few hundred miles away lay the Reich's industrial heartland, the Ruhr, where much of its weapons and ammunition were made. If the Allies could capture that, the road to Berlin would be open. But there was a problem. The web of rivers and canals separating Germany from France and the Low Countries. This is the Waal, one of the biggest rivers. Getting across these was, in its way, as hard for the Allies as it was for Hannibal to get his elephants over the Alps. Attacking across them was difficult enough. But then the Allies would have to send over a mass of trucks, supplies and guns. There were only a few places where this was possible, even if the bridges hadn't been blown. Yet solve the problem, and the war might indeed be over by Christmas. The British commander was Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. He had planned and led the D-Day landings. As the extent of his success became clear, Montgomery became desperate to exploit the German weakness. His headquarters came up with a daring plan, but it had to be carried out within a week, before the Germans could reorganize. The plan was called Market Garden. The plan called for British tanks, under Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, to punch their way over the waterways through Eindhoven and Nijmegen to the Rhine at Arnhem. Once across the Rhine, the British would be able to threaten the Ruhr, or perhaps even push forward to Berlin. There were 8 bridges and 8 major waterways between Germany and the Allied front line. Each one of them would have to be taken intact and held if Market Garden was to succeed. So the Allies decided on a daring and original idea. They would mount the biggest airborne operation in history. 30,000 men of the 1st Allied Airborne Army would land behind the German lines and capture those 8 vital bridges which Horrocks' tanks would have to cross. They'd been kept in reserve since D-Day. Operation after operation had been cancelled. Now they had their chance.
Well, my first reaction was one of enormous enthusiasm and excitement because, as I said, this was the first time that anyone on our side had contemplated the proper strategic use of airborne forces en masse.
There would be 3 airborne divisions, 2 American and 1 British. Dropping by parachute and in gliders, these divisions would land near Eindhoven, Nijmegen and Arnhem to take the bridges. The planners called this an airborne carpet, over which the advancing British Army could push through to Germany. The Airborne Corps commander was the British Lieutenant General Boy Browning. He and his men had just 7 days to prepare. What nobody knew precisely was how many Germans the airborne troops would face when they landed. But information was flowing in from a variety of sources. First, there was aerial photography, which produced pictures like this. And there was signals intelligence from broken German codes. As the soldiers prepared for battle, all this information began to build into an alarming picture. The code breakers suggested that there were 2 SS Panzer divisions in the Arnhem area. Panzer divisions, with their large numbers of armoured vehicles, could be devastating to the lightly armed Paras. At least one intelligence officer became seriously concerned. Major Brian Urquhart was on General Browning's staff at Corps headquarters. His analysis was chilling.
He took me into his office and he showed me photographs of German Panzer IVs, mainly I think they were, tucked in underneath woods. And he went to General Browning and said that in his view the Market Garden operation could not succeed.
The operation was on a timetable and nearing its deadline. Should it be delayed or even cancelled? In real war, intelligence is often imprecise, and Urquhart might have been wrong. Time was getting short. Browning decided that Market Garden would go ahead. He sent Urquhart on sick leave.
They said that his nerve had broken, which, of course, Browning had every right to make his own judgment. My own view is that Urquhart was a very brilliant chap. He knew what he was suggesting, and that was the end of it. But Urquhart was right. The Germans were strengthening their defences. With only 7 days in hand, the planning for the operation exposed flaws in the Allied setup. Soldiers and airmen all had their own agenda. There were disagreements and the inevitable compromises. The air operation was commanded by an American Air Force General, Louis Brereton. He decided that there were simply too few aircraft to deliver all the airborne troops in one go. Therefore, they would be dropped over 3 days. Some British airmen disagreed. They suggested that because British pilots were used to flying over Europe at night, there could be 2 lifts, at least on the first day. But some British airborne soldiers were also unhappy. They were concerned about where they were to be dropped. In some cases, this was up to 8 miles from their objective, the Arnhem bridges. The vital element of surprise, which had worked so well in Normandy,